So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to factor trinomials when a does not equal 1. So let's suppose we're trying to factor 6x squared plus x minus 2. So if we look at these three terms, notice we don't have a GCF, so there's no GCF that we can factor out. So we're just going to work with 6x squared plus x minus 2. So now let's identify the values of a, b, and ac. So a, remember we have our trinomial in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so a is going to be the number with x squared. So a is going to be 6, b is going to be the number with x. Well, we have no number with x, so that's just going to be an implied 1. And then we have ac, right? So if we multiply a times c together, we have 6 times negative 2, which is negative 12. So now let's list out the factor pairs. Okay, so I'm going to start off by listing out the factors of 12. So I have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and I have 3 and 4, right? I just counted 1, 2, 3. And then I don't repeat them beyond this point because they're just going to be the same factors in reverse, right? If I keep counting, I'll have 4 and 3 and 6 and 2 and things like that. So now I'm going to figure out the signs. Notice that a times c is negative, okay? So I'm going to have factors with opposite sign. One will be positive, one will be negative. And then if I think about this, my b, okay, my b is a positive number, so that means my bigger factor is going to be positive. So I'm going to leave all the bigger factors positive, and I'm going to make the smaller factors negative. So now what I can do is I can go ahead and add these factors together to see which one gives me the correct sum. So negative 1 plus 12 gives me 11. Negative 2 plus 6 gives me 4. Negative 3 plus 4 gives me 1. So the correct pair is negative 3 and 4. So what I can do now is I can rewrite that b term using this factor pair. So instead of having 1x, I'm going to write 6x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 2. So now I can do one of two things. I can either factor this by grouping or I can use the box method. I'm going to show you both ways. You can pick which method works best for you and just use that way. So let's first do factoring by grouping. So we have 6x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 2. Okay, let's put our two terms into two groups. And what we're going to do is we're going to find the GCF of each group and factor it out. So 6x squared and minus 3x have a common factor of 3x. So I can go ahead and factor that out. And then when we do that, we'll have 3x times 6 over 3 is 2, and then x squared over x is x. And then minus 3x over 3x, which is 1. And then now we have 4x minus 2. The GCF of these two terms is 2. So we have 4x over 2 minus 2 over 2. So we can do plus 2 times 4 over 2 is 2, and we have x. And then minus 2 over 2, which is 1. Now all we need to do is write the inside terms times the outside terms. So the inside terms, I mean the terms that are in parentheses. So we have 2x minus 1 times 3x plus 2. Okay, and that's how you factor this. If there was a GCF in step 2, I would go ahead and write it in front here. But I didn't have a GCF in this problem, so I'm just going to leave it as is. This is fully factored now as we have written down. So let's suppose you were at step 6 and instead of using factoring by grouping, you decided to use the box method. Here's what you would do. So you'd go to the box and write 6x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 2. Okay? And then we're going to look at each row in each column and we're going to factor out the GCF. So when we look at 6x squared and minus 3x, we can factor out a 3x. When we look at 4 and minus 2, we can factor out a 2. Now if we look at 6x squared and 4x, we can factor out a 2x. And if we look at minus 3 and minus 2, we're going to factor out a negative 1. If anytime the number that's in the box that's right next to where you're writing the factor, if that's a negative number, this factor is also going to keep that negative. Okay, so just something to keep in mind when you're doing the box method. So now we can write the outside terms as our factors, right? So we're going to have 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 1. Okay, so there was no GCF, so nothing we need to add in. Notice we get the same answer. It doesn't matter which method that we used. So let's try another one. Let's try factoring 15x squared minus 42x minus 9. Okay, so if we look at these three terms, notice that there is a GCF. I can factor out a 3. So when I factor out the 3, I'm left with 5x squared minus 42 divided by 3 is 14, so I have 14x minus 9 divided by 3, which is 3. So the value of a, remember we're talking about ax squared plus bx plus c form. So a is going to be 5, b is negative 14, and then a times c is going to be negative 15. So our factor pairs, the factors of 15 are going to be 1 and 15. Let's see, 15 is not divisible by 2, but it is divisible by 3. We have 3 and 5. So now let's figure out the signs. Okay, AC is once again negative, and then B is actually negative, right? B is negative 14. So we're going to make the bigger factor negative, and then let's add these factors together. So 1 and negative 15 gives us negative 14. 3 and negative 5 gives us negative 2. So the correct combination is going to be 1 and negative 15. So let's write out our polynomial in expanded form. So we will have 5x squared minus 15x plus 1x and then minus 3. Okay, so all we did was rewrite that minus 14x as minus 15x plus 1x. So now let's try factoring by grouping. So we put the terms into two groups, 5x squared, and then we had minus 15x, and then the second group will be 1x minus 3. So now let's factor out the GCF of each group. So 5x squared and 15x, I can factor out of 5x. So I have 5x squared divided by 5x minus 15x divided by 5x. So that leaves me with 5x times 5 and 5 cancel, and I just have x, minus 15 over 5 is 3, and then x and x cancel. And then I have plus, well, the next two terms don't have a GCF, okay? So all I can do is just factor out a 1. So that's just going to be like 1x over 1 minus 3 over 1. So if there's no common factor, just factor out a 1. So we have 1 times x minus 3. Now we're going to write the inside terms, so that x minus 3 times the outside terms, we have 5x plus 1. And then don't forget to pick up your GCF from step 2. Okay, so we have that 3 that we're going to go ahead and write in front. Okay, so now let's do the same problem, but I'm just going to show you factoring using the box method. So we have 5x squared minus 15x plus 1x, and then we have minus 3. So what we can do is we can look at each row and column and factor out the GCF. So 5x squared and minus 15x, we can factor out a 5x. 1 and 3, there's nothing we can factor, so we're just going to factor out a 1. 5x squared and 1x, all we can factor out is an x. And then since this is negative, I'm going to go ahead and put my negative here, and then we can factor out a negative 3 from negative 15 and negative 3. So now, once again, my outside terms are going to form my factors. So I have 5x plus 1 times x minus 3. And then always don't forget to pick up your GCF from step 2. So I'm going to write 3 in front. Okay, so that's how you factor when a does not equal 1.